Otto Suwen's internal affairs struggle. Line 3, B-Way. Suddenly, Otto woke up to the feeling of his face being bathed in cold water. The abrupt incident made him spring up and hurriedly check the state of his surroundings. To lower his posture and ascertain the position of the hostile presence would be the first crucial step to take. From Otto's point of view, him being used to camping, failing to notice the imminence of the adversary before they could cause any harm would result in nothing but a formidable mistake. If this was a witch beast, his life was at risk. If this was a thief, his life was at risk. And if this was a pursuer from his hometown, his life was very at risk. In any case, his life was at risk. Placed in that campsite combined with a life crisis, thinking about how, in the first place, he had never been given that many chances to let his guard down, Otto consciously braced himself for the crisis. "Mr. Otto, you're incredibly messy." "Huh, Petra?" Looking at Otto lying on the green grass was a young girl with deadpan eyes, Petra. She worked at the Roswell estate as a novice maid, though it could be said that, now that nearly a year since she started working had elapsed, both her experience and work habits made that title no longer appropriate for her. Anyhow, while in that situation where she looked down towards him, Otto tilted his head greatly. Because in her hand was a bucket, leaving enough circumstantial evidence to determine that within her lied the cause of the impact that he had been showered with upon awakening. Petra, why have you poured water onto me? Did I do anything to make you angry, perhaps? Who knows? It's just that when I came to see the flowers for the morning watering, I found you curled up in the garden and I was scared. It's definitely not revenge or anything of the sort. Thank you very much for the polite explanation. No, Petra bowed politely. And while watching her, Otto scratched his head as he fixed his wet hair. Then, he looked at the grass that seemed to have become his bed. That green grass, although it was quite awkward to call it a campsite, Otto understood that he would not have woken up there until he had received Petra's counterattack. Because, in a mansion full of unworried people, there was no way to keep one's wariness going. I've heard it from Petra, Otone. You were sleepin' in the garden, weren't ya? Doin' that ain't gonna make you less tired, and also, you can catch a cold, you know. When Otto had already returned to his room after getting that early morning act over with, Garfield came to him. Listening to what Garfield said with his sharp fangs clicking, Otto put his hand on his forehead. Things spread pretty quickly, I see. This is about what happened a while ago, right? Petra was just grumblin' about when she went ta water thaw flowers. Damn though, had I been a little quicker, I could have seen Otone all covered in grass. You do not need to worry about those things, really. While organizing what was on top of his desk, Otto tiredly shook his head before the smile of the boy he saw as a brother. Even though Garfield and Petra had promptly exchanged information, it was still unexpected that the two got along well. Garfield was 15 years old and Petra was 13, making them the closest in age within the youngsters of the Roswell estate. And recently, it was frequent to witness Garfield being fed by Petra, who was earnestly devoted to her progress in the kitchen. Since Petra especially adored Frederica, maybe she had good affinity with Garfield due to him being her younger brother, or maybe she had good affinity with the blood of the lineage those siblings had. Well, Petra can get along flawlessly with anybody, so I do not think it matters. So, why were you even sleepin' on top of thaw grass, Otone? Didn't you say you were goin' to take a bath and then sleep after playin' shatranj with me? And I did intend to do so, but I was caught by Miss Ram's group when I finished bathing. The night before, since he had unusually finished all his work for the day, Otto felt pretty eager to jump into his bed after taking a bath. However, that was where he had been trapped by Ram and Frederica, received an invitation for an evening drink, and therefore gladly jumped at it without a second thought. I did not intend to have enough to get drunk, but you know. That alcohol thin. Even y'are all disastrous with that, Otone. I don't get what's so enjoyable about drinkin' that stuff, but it seems like both Ram and Sis like it. Placing his buttocks on the desk Otto was organizing, Garfield empathetically shrugged his shoulders. The drinkers in the Roswell estate were Otto and Roswell, plus Ram and Frederica. Due to Amelia being horribly weak to alcohol, it was forbidden for her. And on the subject of Beatrice, putting aside her actual age, Subaru disliked it, so he did not let her drink it. the aforementioned Subaru, too, used, because I'm a minor, as his reason to refuse drinking. Hence Otto found drinking partners valuable. Being that the case, the combination of the feeling of liberation from having finished his work plus the chance to have the drinking partners he had missed for a long time arose. And as a result, Otto had ended up spending the night with the garden's grass as his bed. Fortunately, I did not catch a cold, so there are no obstacles for my work. That is a relief. I get thaw feelin'. That's not what you should be worried about, but if you're fine with that, Ottonei, then it's all right, I guess. Now is when Hemyukin rejoices, like they say. What does the name of a millionaire famous for perishing after taking a wicked woman as his bride have to do with this? Even then, since having the reason explained to him in detail would probably have been depressing, Otto did not inquire any further. Well, even Hemyukin could be happy precisely because he did not know the details, and this is where I should follow his example. Piling up documents and matching their corners, Otto suddenly looked at the scene outside the window, and his gaze softened. When he saw Otto like that, "Sup?" Garfield also watched outside next to him. And then he noticed the figures of 3 people doing an odd dance in the mansion's garden below his eyes. Thaw Captain and Lady Amelia, plus Beatrice. They seem to be having so much fun every mornin'. Actually, radio calisthenics is becoming a custom, as you can see. It is something splendid, in the sense that it does not break one's daily habits. Though it is not like I have any idea of how his plan to spread that through the whole domain even works. From the dimensions of health and lifestyle, radio calisthenics spreading was a good thing, but Otto had a few reservations about the approach of announcing it as a public commitment for the royal election. Leaving Subaru's banter aside, Emilia had 0 bad intentions and a lot of goodwill, so getting her to make a change of plans through persuasion would prove greatly difficult. That was not actually a bad thing, though. Now that I remember, the captain said we should help IM announce that doing calisthenics every day transforms you into beauty. Isn't that just outright lying? Lady Amelia is more than 100 years old. Surely she was already a beauty a century ago. I sure hope he is not going to try something as unpersuasive as saying she has been doing radio calisthenics for 100 years, since that would be pretty problematic if promptly spread. Wishing to be spared extra misgivings, Otto breathed out a sigh, and, after hearing that, Garfield indiscreetly averted his gaze. When he saw the reaction of the boy who was like his brother, Otto experienced a dreadful presentiment and turned around to where his gaze was averted. His gaze turned away. It turned back. It turned away. It turned back. It can't be, has he already advanced with that rumor? Nah, maybe he's just spreadin' it from time to time, maybe even I helped IM, or maybe it's already close ta bane the vogue at Costal. How troublesome. First of all, becoming a beauty with radio calisthenics is a very Surprised at the unexpected hidden mechanism he had just uncovered, Otto remembered the latest incidents, and his shoulders rose. Now that he remembered, days ago, while in the industrial city Costal, which was close to the mansion, he had been told by the citizens that had already become pretty familiar with his face. They told me, "Mr. Otto's such a beauty, you see," and I thought it was some characteristic expression from Costal, but is it really because of that? That could be it. Ottonei. Where you goin'? Unwilling to let this happen, Otto scratched his head as he readied to exit the room, and when Garfield made a question to his back, "I think it is obvious," Otto turned back. "I shall go and silence the foolish gossip Mr. Natsuki has perpetrated, right now. What would we do if the propagation of those strange rumors had a negative influence on the royal election as a result? Besides, I am afraid the passing ladies might look at me and get weird expectations about radio calisthenics. I feel like that last one is your actual motive, though. Wait, don't you dare go without me." Otto walked lumberingly as his ponderous step sounded, and while hurriedly following behind the man that was like his brother, Garfield clicked his sharp fangs. Ever since the goddess statue incident, Ottonia gets all sensitive when treated like a beauty, And so he muttered, 3. And for that reason, Subaru and Emilia both went to the city in order to clear up the misunderstanding, I suppose. Since Betty is a lady capable of showing consideration, I sensibly chose to let them go on their own. It was a time period when breakfast was over and fire time had begun. There was Otto scanning the material, which he treated as a matter to be scanned anew, that had been brought into his room at some point, and before him was a cute young girl, well-behavedly sitting with her small chest thrown out. It was Beatrice. Although she was Subaru's contracted spirit and always Subaru-bound, there were also rare occasions when, for reasons of consideration like she herself said, she separated from Subaru's side. The one Beatrice was together with the most during those moments was Petra, who adored her, but there were also times like this one when she came to Otto. Her main reason was, "You're busy and therefore have no time to bother with Betty, which helps to make it easier to complain, I suppose. So you just couldn't wait one more second for me to come into the room for this? Don't be so noisy." This is the truth at which Betty, who has seen various types of humans for 400 years, has arrived through her aesthetic sense, I suppose. An innate talent lies within you, an entertainment one. Entertainment. Even though it was not a gratifying truth at all, he would take Beatrice's words with a grain of salt. Very recently, Beatrice was receiving a pretty strong influence from Subaru, to the point that her conduct was greatly close to Subaru's. He used to think that, as long as nobody was harmed, it was something heartwarming. However, after noticing that, in essence, this could mean that Subaru was multiplying by 1.5, he could no longer think of it as heartwarming. It was necessary for Beatrice to fulfill her duty as the one in charge of restraining Subaru whenever Otto was absent. In that sense, you have helped me by showing the actual contamination level received from Mr. Natsuki, thus allowing me to easily grasp the cause of my headaches. Helped. Soliloquies are a good opportunity to reflect on yourself, I suppose, and in your case, it would be more constructive to stop solely paying attention to others and to start thinking a bit more about your own happiness, in fact. As such earnest advice, it doesn't seem to be the same person that, just a while ago, was telling me that it's easier to complain if talking to me. Thinking about how this was, probably, a sign that she worried about him, Otto awkwardly scratched his head. The report of Otto sleeping in the garden had become known in the blink of an eye, and every person he had met since morning had, one after the other, shown concern for his condition. Petra, being the one who had poured water onto him, had served him, by own initiative, a refill of his post-meal tea. And Frederica, too, seemed fairly remorseful about the events of the previous night. Early in the morning, the fact that Garfield had prioritized Otto over the radio calisthenics he would usually join must have been because he was worried about him, and the documents he was given as the Internal Affairs Minister in his room, which were probably left there by Ram, were fewer than usual. That was a relative matter, though. When Otto wondered how much of Roswell's consideration had been included there, the crease between his eyebrows changed its depth. Therefore, if even Beatrice bothered to come to his room, an incomprehensible consideration, isn't that what this is? I don't really understand what you're saying, I suppose. However, I do know that if it was a comprehensible consideration, it would surely turn into a mess even you wouldn't escape from, I suppose. What does that? And at the same time Otto tilted his head, the room's door opened with a boisterous sound. "Otto, are you here? Everyone at the city was surprised to hear you were sleeping in the garden this morning." The one who forcefully flew into the room was Emilia, who was supposed to be heading to Kostul along with Subaru. Since, supposedly, she had gone to correct the misinformation regarding radio calisthenics, he was surprised to see her come back this quickly. "Why did you tell them I spent the night in the garden? Isn't that making more rumors?" Frederica just happened to be talking to the store gentleman that brings everything to the mansion, but the important thing here is, if you were that tired you could have simply told us. Who has their priorities backwards enough to go with the purpose of correcting a rumor, and then return after hearing another rumor? Seeing Emilia pout at the fact that he had hidden his weariness from her, Otto pondered what excuse to tell. However, before the answer to Otto's concern could come out, the one who arrived after Emilia fell into the room. "Why, you're so fast, Emilia-tan, you're an awfully fast runner." "Ah, Subaru, sorry, I didn't mean to leave you behind." But I couldn't contain myself. Looking at Subaru heavily breathe after catching up, Emilia gently caressed his back. While his respiration calmed down, "Heya!" Subaru took a deep breath. "Emilia-tan, it's an amazing thing that you're attentive, but Otto sleeping in the garden isn't anything worthy of surprise. That's like his preference, right? It is not a preference or anything of the like. Well, I must apologize for causing you to worry. You don't really need to apologize. I'd just like you to tell us that you're not fine when you're not fine. You know, since we're all always relying on you when something happens, Otto. Despondently, Emilia raised her eyebrows out of concern for Otto's overwork. At Emilia's side, Subaru and Beatrice looked like they had just reflected on something. Seeing their laudable aspect, Otto felt a very light tickling in the pit of his stomach. Certainly, it is true that all my days are busy with one thing or another. However, that is something I decided to do, because I know that there will eventually be time for me to relax. And that would be, for example, a day like this one, when he would wake up in the garden and receive consideration from everyone, even if only a little bit. A day when nobody brought favors for him felt healthy, yet at the same time unsatisfactory, but that was the work of his own troublesome nature. So, Otto, are you all right? Yes, I am thankful for your concern. Now, I would not like to inconvenience you any further, but... Cutting his words off there, Otto glanced at the material on top of his desk, the mountain of papers that was very subtly lower than usual. And after that, he calculated the time necessary for the process and smiled. Since it seems that I can make room for tea time, would you mind if I join you? It never hurt to occasionally take some time, not for favors or for work discussions, but for nothing more than a friendly chat. And that was how the Internal Affairs Minister of the Emilia camp, Otto Suwen, spent his busy daily life. His half-holiday that had suddenly emerged from only one of those days, the day he had woken up in the garden.